I had the pleasure of hearing Mr. Norquist speak at two events that the National Immigration Forum put on, and I can assure you that he speaks eloquently to the importance of a rational, comprehensive immigration policy for the United States and the economic, social, and cultural benefits that flow from that. On this subject, he speaks the same language as our Nebraska Coalition for Immigration Reform. We believe that the ability to assimilate immigrants is one of the greatest strategic advantages the United States has in competition with other countries. And this is a position that Grover Norquist articulates forcefully. So please join me in welcoming him to the podium so he can express these sentiments much better than I can.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here and to talk about the importance of immigration in the United States. I run a taxpayer group, and I just finished a book on the history of taxation in the United States. And when you ask yourself what differentiates America from other countries, because we're not like other countries, and that's good. One, we had lower taxes. In 1774, before anybody started shooting, we were paying between 1% and 2% of our income as colonists in taxes. In London, the people of London were paying 20% for the privilege of occupying us. Okay? We were paying 1 to 2, they're paying 20. We grew faster, we got richer, we grew because we had lower taxes. But the second thing we did differently than the rest of the world and Britain was we were open to immigration. And we were open to people from all over the planet. It's always, and that allowed us to grow from 3 million people to over 300 million. And the first fib that the opponents of an immigrant-friendly policy make is that the Malthusian argument that if there were more people, we'd all be poorer. You know, if somebody else walked into the room, we'd be worse off. We went from 3 million people to 300 million people, and we are infinitely wealthier, have higher incomes, healthier, better off. Malthus was wrong. You don't divide a fixed pie. People are an asset. And that's the other part of what it means to be American, to recognize people are an asset. They're not the property of the king. They're not they're not subjects. They're citizens. More people. People are an asset, not a liability. Other countries view people as a liability. The Chinese have decided people are a liability, so they're only going to have half as many as they might otherwise have. And that is not going to make them richer and more successful. As stated earlier, low taxes and rule of law differentiated us from much of the planet. Being open to immigration and being able to assimilate people, because we run a free and open society, is the other thing that makes us different from almost every other country in the planet. And even the ones that do immigration towards about as well as we do, don't do it as well as we do. But we're not living up to our own standards, and we could do significantly better than we're doing right now. And that's the debate we're having now. This is not a new debate. Benjamin Franklin, was whining about all the Germans showing up in Pennsylvania in the 1700s. Okay? There have always been questions because new people are different and they don't speak the same language and they don't watch the same TV shows we do. And, all the new guys coming in, it's always disruptive. But we recognize that Uber is a disruptive technology and it's progress. Okay? We recognize that cars are an improvement over horse-drawn carriages. Disruptive is not necessarily a bad thing as people are free. So we've gone through this where people worried there are too many Irish guys or too many Jews coming from Europe, or just on and on and on. People are always whining about the guys who showed up yesterday while their children were busy marrying the people who came 25 years earlier. And we sort of get over it each time. It takes us longer than you'd like, particularly if you're the guy who just showed up and they say, well, there's this hazing process we didn't tell you about. But we all went through it. Well, we didn't, but our great-grandparents did, so we can empathize with you. We don't have to necessarily go through that. But there are both policy questions and political questions. And I think that it is a settled issue, if you look at the history of the world, that successful nations, people move to them. Dying empires, people leave, or at least stop coming. And it is a sign of both our success as a society, that people want to be here, and the people who decide they want to join us kind of self-select. Those are the people I want at my party, the people who want to be at my party, the people who understand, who know enough about America to make the sacrifice to get here. Okay, those of us who are just dropped here in bed with a naked lady, that didn't necessarily sign up or make an effort to get here, we didn't go through that same process of deciding, you know what, that's where I want to be and why. And I think we need to think about immigrants with a lot more respect and understand the difficulties they go through to get what were given to us. The reason why we've been successful as a nation, one of the top ones, is because we've been open to immigration. But look forward, and I think it's even clearer. Who's going to run the future? Who's going to be the most powerful culture, nation, civilization? Is it going to be the Japanese? I went to business school in the early 1980s. Japan is number one. They wrote whole books on the subject. The government told everybody what to do, and it was much smarter than our messy way of organizing everything. Japan was going to be number one. They were going to be richer than us. They had all those little charts. They were going to overtake us. They forgot to have kids, and they cannot do immigration. For cultural reasons, they cannot do immigration. All those Vietnamese boat people who went to Japan are now somewhere else. The Koreans who've been there for 100 years are still not Japanese. And they may speak Japanese, but they're still not. They can't do immigration. They can't grow in the way that we can, and they're declining in numbers. China. People are now writing books about how China is going to overcome us for all the same reasons they wrote about Japan. China decided on this one-child policy, and again, they have a culture that doesn't do immigration, that doesn't do assimilation, that doesn't bring people in and make them part of, people don't want to move there and become part of their culture and country. They don't offer freedom like we do. China is going to get old before it gets rich. The number of people of working age in China is shortly beginning to decline. You think that's odd because there's so many people in China, but there can be a lot of older people, not as many younger people, and working age people is declining. A lot of their growth comes from bringing hundreds of millions of people out of rural areas into cities. There's only so much of that you can do. Europe isn't the future. They're not having kids. They don't do assimilation. You go to Britain and they're whining about the Polish plumbers. What? And the complaint is what? And they just can't do, they're foreigners. That's the problem. They all look alike to me, but anyway. Europe can't do immigration. We're seeing the problems they have. Sure, we have arguments here and will, but again, you go back throughout our history, we always have. We've always gotten past them, and every single time we go, well, I'm so glad those guys are here now. At the time, people were whining about it, but in retrospect, what an asset to the country. They serve in our armed services, they're our leaders. Moving forward, how do we get past the sort of stuck position we're in? Because we have an immigration law that does not meet our needs as a growing and expanding nation. We don't allow enough immigrants. We don't make it easy for people to come here and to do so legally. And so we've got a lot of work that we need to get through, and it takes politicians to make decisions and to cast votes, and they need to know that it's safe. meaning they need to know they won't lose the next election if they make some of these decisions. And so when we have this conversation, the Bible's Badges and Business Group that I've done a lot of work with that puts together law enforcement, businessmen and women, and communities of faith, making the case that stronger immigration, comprehensive immigration reform, dealing with people who have come here and worked here for many years, bringing in more people from the high-tech community, getting a guest worker program that would be more robust. All of these things we need to move forward on so that we can become a more successful nation and all the people who are here can be better off economically, structurally, and our nation will be stronger and more secure. So how do we get from here to there? There have been a lot of people making noise, but at the end of the day, every time we've had this debate, the know-nothings have lost. Every time we've had this debate, the know-nothings have lost, going back 200 years. And it's time for those of us, the silent majority, who when you look at polling data, majorities of the people who identify as Tea Party members are for comprehensive immigration reform. That's not what you'd think if you listen to some people claiming to speak for free market, limited government reforms. The majority of Republicans are for comprehensive immigration reform. Not necessarily, if you were watching Fox TV and seeing a select number of people on TV, what you'd think was there. But it's not easy if people aren't speaking up. In 1999, I was at the Republican National Committee building. I was there representing Americans for Tax Reform. I was Mr. Taxpayer. There were 12 people plus the head of the Republican Party. The Chamber of Commerce, NFIB, the truckers, the restaurant people, the ag people, all the various major trade associations. And we spent an hour telling the head of the Republican Party, Jim Nicholson, what was important. Cut taxes, tort reform, cut taxes, tort reform. Everybody went around. And at the end of the hour, the chairman got up and said, thank you very much for visiting. And he started to leave. And then just like that second to the last scene in those Columbo TV shows, the guy from the Chamber of Commerce said, well, there is this one other thing. What is it? Well, I don't know how to bring it up. What is it? Well, I'm not sure this is really our bailiwick. What is it? Immigration law, we're running out of workers. We need to change our immigration law. And around that table, every single head of a major trade association turned around and said, yeah, that's a bigger issue than the one I brought up when you asked me what was the most important thing for us to focus on. And the reason was that they sort of thought they weren't allowed to participate in this debate, that this was somebody else's debate. The business community were not taking a leading role in explaining to elected officials how important this was to growth and jobs and entrepreneurship in the United States of America. I mean, the people who are paid, whose job it is to tell the politicians what the business community thinks, were mute when asked what's important. I mean, they weren't mute. They said other things, the same things they've been saying for the previous 20 years. Very sound. We should cut taxes. We should do tort reform. I'm for all those things. But nobody brought up immigration. That's changed. The American business community is much more taking a leadership role on this now. The various communities of faith, the Southern Baptist Convention voted overwhelmingly to make comprehensive immigration reform a central issue. The Evangelical, National Association of Evangelicals, the Roman Catholic Church has traditionally been a strong voice. The Mormon Church has come out and been very active. So the communities of faith are speaking to their own members, speaking to their elected officials. The business community is beginning to speak up, and we need more. We need to have louder voices and more continuous voices and more, because this is a very simple conversation. Have you noticed that we've been the country welcoming of immigrants, and it has made us successful, safe, powerful, more cohesive, a better country, a better people? Because it does get to the question of who we are. Are we a bunch of English guys moved west? No. There was one country we had a war not to be part of, It was called England. We're not England moved west. We're people of the book, the Constitution. And that's what makes us different than other countries. And if you get that, and if you're in favor, want to live in a free and open society and live by the Constitution and realize that we're not subjects, we're citizens, and that everybody in the room's equal before the government, that's what makes it possible for us to succeed. That's what other countries have such a hard time doing. And yet, we've got lost opportunities because we have so few visas for high-tech workers, because we bring people over and give them PhDs in science, technology, engineering, and math, and then we kick them out of the country so they can go back to India and start a company to compete with American firms. Why in the world do we do that? Okay? We put waiting lists on people, we have crops rotting in the field, and we don't make it easy for people to come here with a guest worker program to work. We have opportunities to do much better and to become much more successful as a nation, not at the expense of anybody who's here. People come here with PhDs and start companies. You've seen the numbers, the number of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or the sons and daughters of immigrants who are run. These are phenomenal numbers. It's not surprising that immigrants are more entrepreneurial, start more businesses, employ more people per capita when they come here. They kind of self-selected to come here. They ran a gamut. They said they want to be here. They didn't, the guy who was happy sitting in a village, not doing stuff, stayed. The one who wanted more and better and saw it here came. That's the kind of self-selection I want when we're saying, who would you like to have in the country? And we have opportunities to do significantly better. Yeah, the STEM students. We should say to people, and it would help our universities too, if they could say, if you come here and you get straight A's and you get a PhD in one of these highly demanding fields, you can stay and work. They'd have more people coming to the best universities here. Our professors would have better students. We'd have more people here. I want all the smart people here creating jobs, not off in some other place creating jobs to compete with us. For crying out loud, this ought to be easy. Our opponents have such lousy arguments. I remember hearing people say, first we should enforce the law, which actually, if you think about it, means deporting 11 million people. When we had a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, I don't remember any voices telling us, first we enforce the law, and fine or jail. This is a crime to speed, guys. It's not an advisory, that 55 mile. It's against the law to drive 50. First we enforce the law, and then we'll have a debate about what the speed limit should be. Nobody thought that. We said, you know what? We have a stupid speed limit. Let's change it. Then you enforce the law. My favorite sign was out there. I think the Hells Angels people put it out. It said 55 miles an hour speed limit. It's not a good idea. It's just the law. When in the United States we have a law that doesn't work, we change it. And you move it to something that's reasonable and that will make the country better, stronger, safer, and then you enforce it. Not the other way around. And we have a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit immigration law. It doesn't allow enough people to come here. It doesn't allow enough high-tech people to come here. It doesn't allow enough farm workers to come here. It doesn't allow enough young people to come here. The people who are here now, it doesn't make it possible for them to advance and move forward and lead successful lives in a way that it could. And we can do all these things. And the good news is when you look at the polling data and you ask where people are, we're actually in a very good place in terms of building support for just that position. This is our competitive advantage with the rest of the world. We shouldn't throw it away. We should cherish it. And the fact that we have such broad support from all the various communities of faith, on how we deal with the stranger. The fact that the entire business community says this is important, not pieces of it. I mean, I work on tax policy, and people go, some guys like one thing, some guys like... The entire business community understands the importance of a robust immigration policy and that we need to reform our immigration laws to be more welcoming and to be more attractive and to compete with the rest of the world, okay? Because it's not that, we can have more guys coming here, but Canada's out there going, hey, nobody should have to live in Canada. It's very cold. We shouldn't do that to people. All those immigrants who are moving to Canada, we can bring them right across the border. Australia and other countries are making a play because they recognize the power of this issue and how important that it is. For those people who are moved not by policy and by what strengthens the country, we can get into the politics of it. If you're a Republican, there are two states, Texas and California. In Texas, the Republicans said, we like you, we respect you, we're glad you're here, and the Republicans have 40+% of the Hispanic vote, and they have every statewide elected office in the state, the House and the Senate, and isn't changing into the indefinite future. In California, we had Pete Wilson who ran ads attacking immigrants, denigrating immigrants. And the Republicans very rarely elect someone statewide, unless he's like an immigrant from Austria. And they don't have control of the House, and they don't have control of the Senate, and they're unlikely to have it in the indefinite future. And it was all tone and attitude and a focus on being welcoming or not. Do we want, if you're a Republican, you want to be Texas, you want to be California. Think about that, because those are the two options we have as a nation. You can have a Republican governor running absolutely everything. All you have to do is be serious about immigration and how you treat immigrants, both legally and personally, and not be California. There is a cost to being California. And we can change both the Republican Party and the country very quickly. Arizona passed a very hostile law. Oh, we're not against immigrants, just immigrants who break the law. So you know that anti-immigrant bill that they passed in Arizona made it illegal to stand on the side of the road and ask for work. Then they go, ooh, look, that person's on the side of the road looking for work. He's broken the law. Arrest him. We weren't going after him because he's an immigrant. We were going after him because he broke the... They wrote the laws to go after people who are looking for work. I would love to have relatives who wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go stand by the side of the road looking for work, as opposed to not. This is something that should upset us. There are all these people, they're standing on the side of the road, they're looking for work. This is what makes a country great. It's not a problem, it's progress. In Arizona, they passed that law, which was sort of insulting and unhelpful. In Utah, which had the same attitudes at that time, the Mormon Church largely went to work and ran a campaign to make the case on a faith-based level. That's not the attitude one takes to the stranger. And they flipped that state to where they passed the Utah Compact, which is sort of the opposite of the Arizona law. Arizona said, we don't like the federal immigration law, it's not mean enough. Utah said, we don't like the federal rules, it's not welcoming enough. And that happened within a year. Attitudes can change if we focus on it. Attitudes can change if we lead. The business community's begun to take a leadership compared to 1999 when they were embarrassed to bring up immigration in a meeting, private meeting, and the faith communities are now united in moving in this direction. So we have a tremendous opportunity. We have a history which tells us what works. We've watched other countries do it wrong. And as we look at who we compete with in the world, it's clear that our present immigration law, welcoming of immigrants, advantages us against others, but that our failure to do better holds us back from where we could be and what we could accomplish as a country. So I am delighted to be here in Nebraska as I've traveled around the country and talked about immigration, I've often been invited out by business groups and by the various faith communities. This suggests, I mean, for those of you Republicans in the audience, I'm sorry, what is the Republican Party if it isn't guys with jobs who go to church a lot, okay? If the faith community and the business community are both in, it should be a big hint that the water's fine, get in there. And I think we have tremendous opportunity to make the country stronger, more prosperous, safer, and the world a better place if we can continue to lead on immigration, but to improve what we've done so far and do a lot better. We can see the problems that we haven't addressed yet. We know that we can do better. Some of this may be rifle shot, do STEM or Dreamers or H-1B or farm workers or guest worker one at a time, or maybe we do it in one large package. I'm for the one that gets us there firstest, mostest, fastest. And I think if we do a series of single shot, rifle shot progress, it habituates people to making progress and it makes a broader agreement more likely. So as we move forward, I think it will probably have people recommending each and both, and we'll see what we can do. It is possible, let me end with this thought, and that is, can this happen in the next 2 years? Yeah, maybe. There's a lot of distrust between the President and the House and the Senate, but the President has very few things he actually could do between now and the end of his presidency. He wants to do free trade agreements. That will probably happen. Immigration is an area where if he wanted to do it, we could get some things done. But that's going to require the faith communities, the business communities, the silent majority to speak to their elected officials and convince them it's safe. It's safe for you, it's good for the country, but it's safe for you. Thank you very much. Questions?
Grover has agreed to take a few questions, so if you want to think about a question, I do have one here for you, Grover, and then as people can think about it, we'll take a few questions. We do ask that the questions stick to immigration policy, not tax policy. If you want to talk to Mr. Norquist about something else, I think he'll hang around a little bit afterwards. But
I will. We can go through 216, the whole thing. Over there, caucus.
Okay. So I have a question here for you, Mr. Norquist. There is a bill in the Nebraska legislature this year to make it legal for Dreamers to have driver's licenses. That's one thing that maybe Nebraska could do. Usually everybody says it's a federal problem, it's not a state problem, but
Yeah.
why should we do the Dreamer bill? And also, what else can we do here in the state to accomplish what you want to accomplish?
Sure. Look, the history of the last decade is that you don't wait for Washington. We didn't get welfare reform out of Washington. We got welfare reform out of Wisconsin, and then other states, and then it moved in. Some of our most interesting progress has come from states taking steps forward, and then people, again, convincing the politician in Washington it's safe, it's okay, it's not dangerous. If you want to send a signal to congressmen and senators from Nebraska, but other states as well, legislation along those lines, I think, moves the ball forward. It convinces people that there's a constituency for it and that the voices that sometimes come out and make a lot of noise on talk radio and some other places are speaking for themselves. Look, you can get rich with 10% of the market listening to you on talk radio or TV. You can't get elected dog catcher, and you can't lead a country with 10%. But you can survive as a radio talk show host. So the incentives for some of the loud voices we have are not incentives to be where the majority of Americans are or where the majority of Americans wish to be. I think that the more we have states move in this direction and signal to Washington and signal to elected officials and even signal to radio talk show hosts that this has popular support, the faster we move in the right direction. So yes, don't wait for Washington. Lead. State legislators can lead on this issue Medical marijuana isn't something that came out of Washington, D.C. I mean, make a list of the things that are moving on issues. Washington politicians will be the last guys to vote yes.
Grover, one of the big concerns that I hear about immigration reform is national security. I was wondering if you would address that.
Sure. Look, this is a national security issue. And if you care about national security, you want to have the strongest and most powerful nation you can. And the way we deal with our enemies in the United States is we grow away from them. We become bigger than they are. We used to worry about England picking on us. We're bigger than they are. And so part of it is economic growth. Part of it is a strong technological base and moving forward. But the other is, if you're worried about bad guys coming into the country, what you want is wide gates where the people coming in, you know who they are, you know where they're going to go to work, because it's easy to go from immigrant to worker. We did this under Eisenhower with the Bracero program, where we made it easy for people who had jobs and people who are looking for jobs to get together. And we went from arresting 700,000 people a year on the Mexican border down to 40,000 arrests, because everybody who wanted to come in and work could come in legally. You knew who they were. And when we got rid of the Bracero program, because organized labor didn't like it, we went back to 1 million people getting arrested at the border. You want a border you can secure, have at least a guest worker program, and more robust immigration, make it easier for the people who are here undocumented to have documents that allow them to go back and forth from jobs here to be able to visit relatives and so on. All of those things that we talk about as comprehensive immigration reform make our country more secure from bad guys trying to slip across the border, because there are fewer people you're trying to police at the border. But if everybody who comes over looking for work has to come over illegally, and you've got to treat that person the same way you would somebody who's sneaking across the border because they're working for bad guys on, we don't have the bandwidth for that. We don't have the army for that. Yeah.
Grover, thank you for coming to Cole, Nebraska, and your leadership on this issue. What do you think of the president's executive actions with regard to immigration?
I was disappointed because much of what he did could have been done in comprehensive reform. What he did with Dreamers could have passed as a law if he hadn't done it the way he did. The politics in Washington is messy. Historically, the driving force for immigration restrictionism has been the labor unions. Every law going back to the Chinese Exclusion Act, which, the Chinese Exclusion Act said no Chinese prostitutes and robbers. Talk about being nice, okay? Then they came back a year later, they said, okay, we mean no Chinese people. They made it clear. But the first one is just insulting. That was Samuel Gompers, AFL-CIO, the attempt at a Japanese Exclusion Act, Samuel Gompers also. Every one of those restrictionist laws was moved forward as a result of organized labor's pressure. Going recently, and this is why it's difficult to guess where President Obama is on this, Bush wanted to do immigration reform. Back when he got elected, when he was running, and I met with him, he said, there are two things I want to do: immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, and personalizing Social Security, so everybody retires with hundreds of thousands of dollars in a 401k, and the Social Security system doesn't go blank. That's why I supported him, because I thought those two things would change the country in powerful ways. He got sidetracked, but when he came back to immigration reform in 2007, we thought we were going to make progress. I was working with the guys in the Senate, and at a meeting, it was written about in Bob Novak's column in the Washington Post at the time, a guy came into the meeting where they thought they were cutting a deal with a letter that said, this is over, this is not happening, and the senator who killed immigration reform and voted as the key vote on committee to kill it was named Barack Obama, okay? And he was doing that to earn his chops with organized labor. So when for 2 years he was president, we had Democratic House and Democratic Senate with overwhelming support, and never introduced a teeny bill, a rifle shot, a comprehensive, and anything, I was not surprised. Some people were. I wasn't, because I don't think he's there. If somebody told you for 2 years he didn't do anything, somebody told you, I really want to go to the gym and exercise, and for 2 years they get up every morning and they don't go to the gym and they go to bed at night, and for 2 years they never go to the gym, then their car breaks down, meaning the Republicans take over the House, and they go, oh, I can't go to the gym, my car broke down. You didn't go to the gym when you could. I don't think you want to go to the gym. So trying to guess how to move things through D.C. when Obama was the guy who killed that when it was in his political interest, the effort to get comprehensive immigration reform in 2007, and then specifically didn't do it for 2 years when he could, would have passed in a second, with Republican support, unlike Obamacare. But what do we do now? I don't know. Could we do it piece by piece? The Republicans would cheerfully vote H-1B visas, and Democrats. You're going to be a bipartisan effort on H-1B. Some people go, no, we should do it all at once. My thought is, I'm for all at once if you can, but if you can do pieces of it, I think it habituates elected officials to voting for something that's called immigration reform, and they notice that some people scream, but the number of people who scream and make noise is not as impressive as they thought it was. And every time you do that, I think you're closer to recognizing that we have a country that welcomes immigrants, despite some loud voices which sometimes sound harsh. But again, we've been through that before. We have lived through it, and the know-nothings have always lost this fight. But people are very nervous about being out there by themselves and they'll get jumped or something. So it's not clear how best to move forward. It's not even clear where the White House is on that. So when the president did something by executive order that could have been passed as a law, some people just think he was poking people in the eye politically, not trying to get it done, because an executive order disappears when you do. So was it helpful or not? Unclear whether it was actually in the long-term progress or not. We may be able to turn it into progress, but it may not have been meant that way. I got these lights here. I'm not able to see very well. Yeah.
Norquist, thank you so much for your very refreshing attitude towards immigration reform.
Yeah.
I can tell you I'm a businesswoman and I read the Wall Street Journal, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room read the Wall Street Journal, and I know that they were one of the biggest advocates on immigration reform last November, or not last November, but in November.
Last 50 years.
2013,
Yeah.
they got together all the top CEOs in the United States and asked them what is the most pressing issue facing our economy? How can we jumpstart our economy? How can we generate more jobs and greater economic growth? And what they said was immigration reform was the #1 reform, followed by education reform and tax reform.
What year was that?
2013, November of 2013, the top 100 CEOs in the United States got together. The question is, the reality is it is so much tougher to move that dial. Even though we know American business people feel strongly this is fundamental to our economic growth and development, to create jobs, to make sure we have that flexible labor pool. I can tell you the state of Nebraska is like hitting the wall. Now, I know you encourage small steps. Let's take baby steps. And in the Nebraska legislature, we're looking right now at just allowing those young people that have been brought to the United States by their parents and they're undocumented to get a driver's license. What do you think we have to do in the state of Nebraska to work with our wonderful legislators who are terrific to get that one small step passed?
Sure. Call them, talk to them, visit them. People just need to hear again and again from many voices. And you don't want to yell at people. You just want to say, here's what I do for a living. Here's why I'd be very helpful. I hope you'll vote for this bill. And one-on-one phone call, this stuff matters. letters and emails actually count, but if you make the effort to go to a meeting and shake their hand and tell them this is important, invite them to your business group to talk about this. They're used to being brought in to talk about other stuff. Ask them to come on into the local business group or a group of people you put together and say, I'd like to talk to you about this issue, and then have them hear about it, because they're used to hearing the loud voices, but they're not necessarily attached to anything, and some of those loud voices don't live in Nebraska. They live on radio airwaves from someplace else. Repetition, 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 one-on-one. There's no silver bullet. People need to hear that their constituents and people they respect think this is a good idea and it's important. And the good news is the support for this is so much broader than you'd guess if you listened to the screaming matches on some talk radio. And the straight polling shows strong support on each of these efforts, and that's very helpful. But politicians go often on intensity rather than preference. So you need to make it clear. I feel strongly about this. That's why when I come and talk to you, I'm talking about this issue, not one of the other 12 issues that are important too, but I'm talking to you about this issue. And that's why I'm here talking to you about immigration and not cutting the capital gains tax, which is also a good idea.
Okay, well, we'll have just two more questions, I think. We have one over here.
Hi, forgive my political naivete, but when I hear comprehensive immigration reform, I'm not 100% sure what the top 5 planks of that might be. So in a perfect world, what would those be, and how do we get something through Congress that contains those things and not 40 other things that are irrelevant?
Sure. There is this fear in the wake of, 3,000 pages of Obamacare that if you pass a bill with 300 or 3,000 pages, there will be, or the stimulus package, right? There'll be things there, shards of glass nobody told you about. So one of the challenges of comprehensive is people think it means long, okay? And if that's the case, people very often, I think you're quite right. Look, people are talking about doing something on border security. They're talking about doing something for the undocumented who've been here for some time, both dreamers and people who've been working here for some time, regularizing their participation and legal status. You're talking about a robust guest worker program for future flows of immigrants so that people can come in legally. You're talking about H-1B visas at the high-tech area. You're talking about other visas for short-time work and everything from ski areas to Martha's Vineyard employment. So those sorts of things. And some of those can be done piece by piece. It may end up that you can do bunches of it together. I tend to think you move in both directions and you take what you can get, as much as you can get, and keep moving.
Thank you for being with us this evening. I am Senator Matt Williams from the central part of our state, from a very, very conservative district. A district that talks about dreamers and achievers, and recognizing that if our area of our state is going to improve, and if our state is going to grow, the most conservative groups in Nebraska County have recognized that if we don't solve some issues, we cannot grow as a state. How can we as policymakers make a difference that Washington can't seem to make, and we can bring back to our state and recognize that if we don't move from just being dreamers about what we should do to be achievers for what we can do, we're missing the boat.
I think it's everything from having conversations in churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples, and just having that conversation of being welcoming. I think part of it is remembering our history and teaching our history to our kids, that this is I mean, people say it's a nation of immigrants, but we say it so quickly. That's a big deal. Not all countries are. And I mean, over thousands of years, I suppose they all are. But, over the last 200 years, not all actually are. It's not how they got going. It makes us different, and it's made us successful. I think a lot of one-on-one conversations. This is not easy with children, with coworkers, bringing cattlemen in to talk to other constituents. Like, if you bring in all the guys who want to take a hostile to immigration view, and you bring them all in at once, then they'll sit and they'll out-seg each other, and whoever yells loudest won the argument about being most against. But if you have a group of people that's mixed, and people can talk about it, you'll get a much more nuanced conversation, even from the people who think of themselves as immigration skeptics or critics of immigration. Because even the guys who are the most skeptical or critical have a life history of relatives and friends and coworkers, and so they know and are a lot better than they sound sometimes. Like Mozart's music, it sounds better than it. Anyway, I think it's just again and again reaching out, having these conversations. There isn't one argument you can get and then everybody goes, you win, I give up. But you need to wear down the other team and bring in lots of voices from around, so that a critic has to talk to people of faith and to the business community together and come to grips with what they think they're trying to get at. I mean, the good news for those of us who value immigration, realize what it's done for the country and the role it will play in making us the dominant civilization, culture, and power in the world, which will make us and the rest of the world safer and better, is one of the big pieces of that is a more robust, healthy, welcoming immigration policy than we have today. And to be fair, ours is better than most other countries, but we can do much better than we do. We have lower taxes in a lot of other countries. We still need to do much better. We were at 2%. We're now at about 30%. Okay, we should be closer to 2 than 30. And we need to be moving forward on immigration as well.
Let's wrap it up. Give Grover another round of applause.
As a small token of our appreciation, I would like to present this plaque to you from our coalition.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
I think there are probably members of that coalition that don't have representation on the walls of your office staff, so we hope.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you very, very much.
We appreciate everything you've done.